Hello, everybody, and welcome to Astrology Meets Economics, Part 3. I'm Gary from Alternative Interactions, and you are?
Meten from Platonic Planes.
This show is going to be a winter continuation. It's going to be in two parts because we will go on to charts in the second part and it'll be more expansive. But Meten, oh my God, so much is happening at the moment.
Too much, man. I don't know if we have the time. Where's my watch? No watch on. Let's see how much
No,
time
no,
we have.
no, no, I'm the same. I mean, I'm looking at my watch and flying. There is so much going on. And what we thought we would do is Meten will just go through some of the astrology. And as he reads out some of the bits and pieces and recaps kind of thing, I will jump in as and when something triggers me into what's going on, if it's appropriate to explain and express in real world terms that is, what's going on. And obviously, Meten and I will then go into discussion and express as well as we can currently for the complete madness that we're seeing the world in at the moment. So, Meten, take it away.
All right, let's do it. So, if you guys remember the last video we did, I set up a forecast charts based on the seasons. So that means the last chart I did, it was a winter forecast. So this is set up for the ingress of winter solstice. So it was around December 20th. Now, in that chart, we do the chart for Washington, D.C., the seat of power in the modern world currently at the moment. And in that chart, the U.S. was in the 11th, the sun, which symbolizes the United States, was in the 11th house. As we move in about, like 15 days, 16 days, as we move into spring equinox, ingress into spring, the new chart is also still going to have the sun in the 11th house. Now, what that means for the United States is that the thematics are alliances. Alliances made, alliances broken. And what we're seeing now as a continuation of the winter forecast is more attempts to build and destroy various alliances. What we've seen is what we're going to see into March 20th. Currently, it's March 5th. Is it March 5th today?
8th today on
8th? Oh,
recording.
8th. Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
better get on track. That's like 12 days. So, what we're currently seeing is just a continuation of the winter chart, which is dealing with major themes involving trade, deficits, inflation, increased manipulation in the markets, legislative struggles of the current president. We had Trump recently, his tariffs were denied, loss of credibility. That's starting to happen with the recent point that Gary's going to jump in on in a minute. Backroom dealings, erosion of, yeah, I already said, like, alliances made, alliances broken.
Yeah. That's a big one, isn't it? The alliance is broken. I mean,
Yeah, and so I think that's just the general. So let's say a couple more things, and we'll shoot to Gary's examples. Gary's got the precise examples for it, but it seems like what's occurring is that as we continue into this spring ingress, this spring chart of this particular season up until June 20th, it's more the same, perhaps even pushed to the point of just like bold, extreme overreach with consequences in the political, financial, and indirectly just natural disruptions, and a kind of redefinition of the trajectory of the current leader of the United States. So with that, I'll stop there, pause there, and Gary will introduce to us some examples of this continuation of this kind of power plays.
yeah, thank you, Meten. Um, During the beginning of the winter period, the 3rd of January, We saw America attack Venezuela, remove the leader. They then started taking the oil, and just recently it's been reported that they now have cleaned out their vaults in gold, and they're moving physically the gold back into America that was never theirs. That's kind of a big deal. But the oil and tankers being stopped in the ocean and taken over by America. At the time, I wasn't really quite sure what I was observing, because some of those tankers were headed towards China, and China didn't really seem to be reacting in the way that I expected them to be so. But then that made sense to me when we had the Chinese coup January the 18th. And I think from memory, the 24th, the next Chinese leader was executed. Most of the generals went, and China is still in a state of flux with huge clear-outs politically and militarily. That's very key, militarily. It could mean that China is not in a position currently to affect any kind of military action in a sustained way because of who was behind the coup. And the same person or same group of people, the banksters, the dumb elites, were behind the Venezuela attack, because we're still talking about the three pillars of control in this realm. And the three pillars, the third pillar being America, is the military might. We're seeing that really play out at the moment. Big style. So China is knocked off its guard due to the coup. They're still not in a position, I don't think, to be affecting anything particularly with the turmoil. Particularly as on the 28th of February, the USA and Israel attacked Iran. The Strait of Hormuz has been shut, and oil has stopped flowing. Now, Meten spoke about alliances broken. We observed this very clearly. Certain American bases were attacked very quickly by Iran, and then oil refineries were attacked. Key parts of the oil infrastructure of the Arab nations were affected, as well as desalination plants. The lifeblood has been taken out. Now, there are rumours of Mossad agents being arrested throughout the Arab nations with devices on them that might go bomb. It's very likely, and it's been reported by eyewitnesses, that some of the missiles that came into the refineries, if they were from Iran, took a detour via Israel. The Arab states have been paying America an awful lot of money to protect them. Billions, billions and billions. And when it came to it, those defenses were turned off and turned to protect Israel, and the Arab nations were left to fend for themselves with high-end military targets sat within their borders. That's a bad, bad look from America. Real bad look. And ties in exactly to the astrology that Meten's talking about. What we're also seeing is and I don't care if this gets flagged by the loonies. The climate rubbish. America is not following the climate stuff. They're not doing it because they know what it is. They know it's a psyop. Nor is China, nor is Russia, nor is India, nor any of the bigger players here. It's only the West that have taken into this, which is a deliberate takedown of the Western nations and the depower structure, decoupling of the Western power structure to enable America to really truly take power. Almost all of Iran's oil and over half of Venezuela's oil was going to China. And last year, 17%, 17 again, we love that number, don't we? But 17% of all China's imports of oil came from those two sources. America, one of the pillars for the dumb elites, has just cut that artery off from China as China is fighting internally a coup that was also started by the dumb elites. The dumb elites, the money, understand that they're in trouble, big trouble. And so the coup in China was to try and take back, via their old school system, the Bolsheviks, communism in its truest form, take back China and control it, destroy the BRICS nations to create the one world order. I think this has failed. And I think we're seeing a huge flux of power and destabilization at the moment from major assets as well as currency, the fake monetary system. Meten, have you got any thoughts on that at the moment? Sorry about that, everyone. We actually had a power cut
Yeah,
with
on my
Meten.
side. It was on my side. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that, everybody.
So
And
we'll start again. So Meten, have you got any thoughts on that?
yes. So, as Gary noted, Gary just gave the evidence for this 11th house sun in both the winter chart. We're still in winter right now. We still have 10 more days. So, we're still, but already the spring chart is occurring. It's already happening, as Gary just gave evidence for. There's a lot of overreach. There's a lot of alliances that are actually being destroyed. So alliances in the back rooms being created, new attempts for new alliances, as Gary pointed out with the China example in late January. Venezuela is an example of just a power grab, and what we have now with this spring ingress in 10 days is we have this buildup of energy towards more of the same. And it being that currently we're in a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, there's going to be a lot of miscalculated overreach, a lot of mismanagement, and the consequences of that will be felt as we arrive at late March and early April, and leading up to the big date that you and I and Isabella covered in our forecast for the April 10th to the 18th, that there's going to be some monetary consequences for what's happening. And as Gary just summarized, there was an attempt, a huge attempt for a Western domination of the financial markets and the financial world, ultimately with tokenization and the developing technologies. And the attempt to do that will continuously be pushed throughout the year. It seems to me like that's the goal of the year, to at least create the setup structure for tokenization. But tokenization is going through a lot of problems right now because the BRICS nation is not interested in that. And they have their own trade going on, which is not using the petrodollar, the dollars, as Gary's going to note for us. So what I'm seeing is more of these kind of rash and aggressive displays of power build up till the end of the month. And there's a lot of consequences for that because now is not really the time to do that. And as Mercury retrogrades in Pisces, it's going to hit a lot of the prior eclipse points. And so, what was occurring, and Gary and I went over this for some of the last eclipses. We did the September 7th, the September 21st. There was incidents that occurred. They were economic, they were related to country power grabs. And then there were some recent eclipses, one in Aquarius, one in Virgo, with Mercury going behind, going backwards right now, right? Revisiting those points is going to open up clues as to what really occurred during those backdoor meetings, because that's what an eclipse is. It's a backdoor hidden meeting where a new alliance is being formed or a new agenda, and we're not privy to it on the surface unless we can catch a rare headline here and there, as you did in January and as I did as well. And so it seems that there will be really powerful consequences for this building up into April. So we have a build up for March. It'll be slow and gradual for the markets. Gary was commenting on silver and gold, and you'll see more Gary in a minute. He was commenting on the continued control and necessary kind of manipulation of those currencies because of the recent jump in oil prices due to the war. And with that, we might see a tumble in the gold and silver markets and thus an opportunity for crypto to start moving up again. I don't think anything will really move up too quickly or too strongly until midway through the spring cycle, but I won't go over that till tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go over the charts and I'll go over that in detail. But Gary, if you can share with us a little of the consequences of these power moves, what they mean for the silver and gold markets.
Yeah, certainly. So the consequences are, um, Meten spoke briefly about Iran and the blockchain and what they're trying to do. Iran is not a Rothschild central bank, and Iran has clearly been dealing with China off the books. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So I'll supply you some oil, and I need to get round this embargo that I've got or these sanctions that I'm on, and I need a bit of something else. And so clearly there's been some background trading going on. This is totally against the blockchain and the system of control that they want to put in. Consequences. This is just one of the consequences of what we're seeing in Iran. How many fish can they kill with one barrel in a stone? It's that like, what can we do that can affect multiple things at the same time? But the problem is, by allowing the Gulf states to be hung out to dry, the Gulf states are now reviewing their investments into the USA. I would say that potentially some of those investments were starting to get pulled back already, because we've just seen BlackRock restrict withdrawals from a flagship private credit fund after a surge of outflows. There was a run on BlackRock, there was a run on the bank, and BlackRock had to stop it. This is huge. This is huge. Because for me, it feels like we're seeing the pulling back of finances, money, investments going in to America. Consequences. Meten spoke about consequences of the actions. And these are backdoor investments. These are things that we are not privy to. We don't know where the 100 billion or 10 billion or 50 billion is going to be invested in. We have no idea. And certainly a company like BlackRock would be one of those intermediaries that would hold the funds to allow it to be dished out and controlled via the control mechanism. You know, another consequence that the Strait of Hormuz being shut was we have no ships going through there. And oil's the main thing that's needed coming through there, and certain goods. Lloyd's of London, who are the biggest insurer in the world and part of the control mechanism of all shipping and have been for 200 years. So, for those that don't know, if your ship is not insured via a broker or via Lloyd's of London, you are not allowed to dock at any port controlled by the West. You are not allowed to sail in certain areas of the world without certain insurances. They control the entire maritime world. And Donald Trump, to ensure certain things flow for America, has said that he will escort certain ships with American warships, Navy escorts, to ensure the flow of certain goods or certain things. This is a direct slap in the face of Lloyd's in London and the control mechanism. So it's almost as if we're witnessing infighting between the three pillars of the control mechanism. That's quite fascinating. Now, silver and gold as well at the moment have been having a very torrid time of things recently. Initially, we saw the manipulation, and we spoke about this with Monaco 64, where what we fundamentally saw, and Monaco expressed it very well, was the reverse repo system was a way of pumping money in to the banks who were short on silver to finance the silver purchase back of the shorts, the paper money, and then the banks crashed the silver price, enabling them to buy back even more silver short paper for the same amount of money that was created out of fresh air by the Federal Reserve to enable to bail these banks out. That's quite interesting. But something that needs to be remembered is every single missile that America fires has got loads of silver in it. And it's just been atomized. And that silver is not counted anywhere. And those missiles need to be restocked and restocked fast. And so America will need a huge amount of silver. Where they're going to get it from, because they're nearly out of silver. But the price is dropping, which does not make sense. America is now the largest supplier of oil in the world. I'll say that again. America is now the largest supplier of oil in the world. Fundamentally, by creating the Iran situation, America has put itself in pole position for controlling the oil and the petrodollar via their own control mechanisms. So the alliances that they've had with OPEC has kind of been pushed to one side. They've allowed some of these OPEC sites to be hit by missiles or have struck them with missiles, or they have been blown up by terrorism, by a Mossad. So that the petrodollar can be controlled in a way that can then help the financial institutions to make even more money and balance the losses they're seeing in Ukraine via Russia and everywhere else. Because the books have to be balanced, and they don't care where the money comes from or how it's balanced. Now, debt bonds have been, the yield has been going up and up because people, or countries I should say, have not wanted to deal with them. Institutions have not wanted to deal with them. And the petrodollar was crashing in an uncontrolled manner. What we're now seeing with oil going up is that all these countries that hold debt bonds need to cash in their old debt bonds and renegotiate and buy more debt bonds so that they have physical dollars to buy the petrol in dollars or the oil in dollars so that they can keep the system moving and keep their countries going. And we're seeing that the bond rate has gone from 5%, and they were rolling this over month by month, Matem. So fundamentally, America was in a position where they were absolutely screwed with the debt bonds, and they were rolling monthly over and over and over their debt on debt bonds, and the price was going up and up and up in an unsustained way that would have taken the markets out. By this war happening, they have enabled to stop that in one hit, drop the price of the debt bonds interest rate down to around 3%, so saving them hundreds of trillions of dollars, forcing countries that don't want to hold these debt bonds into purchasing the debt bonds, getting rid of the expensive part of the debt, turning that into cash that those countries are then spending back into the American system via oil. It's genius. It's a Ponzi scheme, and it's absolute genius. But as Meten said quite rightly, there's only so much money or so much credit in the world at the moment, and the money that's gone into silver and gold will have to come out to purchase the debt bonds. And so organizations are going to have to drop the physical assets for fiat fake paper currency yet again. Any thoughts on that before I carry on, Matem?
Just that, and thank you for that. That's just, it's so much complexity, you know, in a relationship to what the manipulation of what they're doing from one you know, representation of currency to another. I mean, it's just the water is flowing, right? It's like what bank you stop at, right, and invest in. It's all works with that metaphor. What I was going to add is that as Gary was narrating this, I was reflecting on the shock reversal, the shock dates that are kind of going to be very, very extreme response, emotional cycle aspects of the market that will occur. And we are building up towards one right now. So there will be more amplification of, and the downward spiral of the metal markets could happen around March 20th to March 23rd. That's possible. And build till the end of the month, and again revisit in April when things get even more intense. But to add to that, this month we have on March 22nd and March 25th, we have the Sun conjunct the Aries vortex. Two aspects of the Aries vortex on both days. So that's revisiting these reality checks. So it'll be interesting to see what reality checks occur on the 22nd, 25th. On the new moon on March 19th, we have the MOMC meeting. So more manipulation will become clear. And this month is packed because it's packed with the huge shift of Mercury going direct. So the consequences of all this kind of back dealings, all this secret kind of communications and betrayals, right? Stabbing in the back. And that will all result in a very, very extreme, intense market amplifications in April. And who knows what in April, but something related to, definitely to the markets. And carry on, Gary. That's about it.
Yeah, no. And Matem makes a very valid point here. This is a build-up of energy, and at some point that energy has to explode somewhere, you know. And fundamentally, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul at the moment, and we're seeing tangible assets go down. But there's elephants in the room. Like for the 6th year running, silver is in a deficit, and I think it's something like 650 million ounces this year. We only mine 850 or 80 million ounces a year. That is unsustainable. We're about to run out of silver. And we are, institutionally wise, and that pinch point's coming fast. And it doesn't matter how much of a magician you go, look over here, don't look here, look over here. At some point, the illusion's going to fall. And as Meten says, we've got these expression points coming within the stars and the astrology where it's going to become blindingly obvious to certain institutions or certain groups of institutional investors that there's something majorly wrong. You know, they're kind of like walking around with blindfolds on themselves because they don't want to see the reality of the situation. It's how long they can keep that blindfold on as they wander around in the dark pretending everything's fine.
Good metaphor for what's going on, because right now, in a way, we're all in the dark right now. There's no clarity to be reached for and grasped that, because we're all in a state of reflection. I mean, Mercury retrograde in Pisces, we're all in a state of reflecting on and reassessing and reviewing all the events that have taken place in the last couple months. And as we're attempting to get clear now in 10 days, as it carries forth more and with the shadow, the spring is a very special time. I can't underscore this enough. This is on many levels, because the spring is the beginning, at least in the cycle that I'm using. The spring is, and the tropical cycle of astrology, it's the beginning of a new year. So we have March 20th, and then those dates, a couple days after, coinciding with the Aries vortex, which is in itself a new beginning. So we have a new beginning on top of a new beginning happening in 10 days. And this energy is not just for us to look at the whole year ahead, but it's a moment in time that no emotional cycle of energy can be suppressed. This is Aries energy, which is the beginning of this new year. That's pure fire. And so it's going to burn through whatever facade is attempted to be put forth. And it's also a sacred time for us, because as human beings in our own essence, it's a beginning of what new seeds we want to put down into the earth to move forward. So it even behooves us to take a day, perhaps right there on equinox, and not pay attention to any media at all, but to revisit our Aries vortex, revisit our vision, and kind of visualize and feel in about where we want to go. Because, every day is a new adjustment to our vision, right? Whether and it's not necessarily from outside. Right now it's happening internally. We may pay attention, you and I, to, the stuff going on outside, but there are internal movements as well, because the planets are within as they are without. So this is just a quick reminder and resolve for everyone, just a reminder to really check in with yourself and how your own Aries vortex is doing, how your own kind of assessment of your values, because what's going to occur in April is going to be continuous, and we won't have time to breathe until after April. May, there'll be time to relax and integrate. And right now we're in a period of integration and reflection. So during this period, take your time, because it's about to get pretty intense, as we begin the spring equinox, and there's going to be build-ups and tumble-downs, and some powerful positive intensity mid-April. And we'll get into a little more of that tomorrow with the charts. But for right now, what Gary is pointing to, what Gary's already explained is really intense. I can't imagine it getting more intense, you know what I mean? More dramatic, more involved, more like Machiavellian, you know what I mean? Like, if we were to go into all the strategies of war that have been occurring, like it's really intense. it's quite shade, and you know what I mean. It's just like out of control what this side is doing and that side and what's happening. But there will be further consequences to this, and it's going to involve all these nation states that are in that area. I mean, right now the Aries vortex, and I'll show this tomorrow. There's an astrocartography chart. Some of you guys know I do the astrocartography readings, which is where your angles are at across a world map. Now these are 4 lines, and there's variations. There's 4 variations of each line, but to keep it simple for now, just like in an astrology chart, there's an ascendant line, which is the beginning of the chart. There's the IC, which is the home, and there's the descendant, which is the midpoint of the chart, but it's also opposite the ascendant, so it's like the enemy of the ascendant or the opposite of the ascendant. And then there's the MC, which is like the stage of the world. And so if we overlay that map at this spring ingress chart for the new year and for the new quarter, if we do that, we have some very interesting countries on those lines. And the descendant, keep in mind, this is a chart for the United States astrocartography. So what I got on the descendant, which is like the open or the not the open, yeah, open enemy, is we have Russia, Iran, Persian Gulf, and the Gulf states. Wow. Can't make this stuff up, as everyone likes to say. Can't make it up. On the ascendant line, which is the surface of the world, the beginning, we have the Pacific Ocean. There's been a lot of talk about possible natural earth disruptions in the Pacific coast and the Pacific Ocean. In the last chart for winter, it was on the Pacific coast, but now it's moved to the Pacific Ocean. And then on the IC, which is the home front, we have Japan, Korean Peninsula, and Australia. And then MC, which is the surface, which is the stage of the world, what people have been talking about, we have Brazil and Greenland. And we know Greenland's been a huge subject and thematic. And Brazil could come more into the news as well. But I just add that in more for tomorrow, because we'll go into that. We'll go into that chart tomorrow and a couple other charts. But as it's very important, maybe even re-listen to what Gary's saying, because it's just so. There's just so much depth into what he's describing. There's so many layers of it. Because Gary, you're describing the plots and plans and like war strategies that are occurring.
Yes.
You're describing the consequences to the markets of those strategies. And then you're also describing the layer of how that affects the surface markets. Because there's the manipulation in the background, there's the markets that we see on the surface, the results the next day, and it's all coming from war, because the war we're experiencing, it's a war, it has to do with currency. It's not anything else but a war for territory, as usual.
It's very interesting. When you spoke about the Pacific and the States, South Korea's stock market actually hit the stopgap. I think it was yesterday or the day before, because it's dropping so much they had to shut the stock market down. So South Korea was in danger of collapsing, stock market wise, overnight in just one day, and they actually hit the stopgap. Now, when we're seeing events like that, and remember when silver started to drop, they turned the stopgap off and allowed it to drop. Okay, so you can see all the manipulation here. But certainly, we also have the Japanese with the carry trade causing major financial ripples still in the whole system, which means that the free easy money's now stopped. Japan's in big trouble. South Korea's in big trouble. North Korea are saying that whatever comes, they're ready for it, and they probably are, because they're aligned to China. And so you're seeing all this political movement and chess pieces, but fundamentally the markets are going in a downward spiral. We know they're on a bubble on top of a bubble on top of the bubble, and they need a big reset. But it's how big a reset can the market handle without causing complete contagion and collapse mid-war? Everything's on a knife edge. And as you know from reading that book from 1776, when was that book? What was the book you read in France?
Beyond Inflation in France by Andrew White, and that was about it's either the 1790s or the 1890s.
Yes,
About that
18.
time period.
Yeah, yeah, something like yes.
And it
Yeah,
was
I
the
can't remember.
5 year experiment with creating, issuing a paper currency, which for the time was novel, and now everybody's doing it, right? Under control. And yeah, go ahead. You were saying about that.
Yeah. So what we're seeing at the moment is exactly that scenario. They've created paper currencies or bubbles of, and stock market bubbles. And ultimately, the only way they got out of that was because, as Meten told me quite rightly, they were either going to starve to death or there was going to be some kind of civil uprising. So what they did is they created a war to get rid of the people so they didn't starve to death. What we're seeing is a war before the collapse and people starve to death. Now, people aren't going to starve to death in this modern world, but we're using it as a principle of historical events are playing out exactly the same way, but with slight differences on who's in what position. But fundamentally, we're seeing this all play out in a way that's fascinating and is the old school playbook. But what we're seeing is virtually five or six playbooks all playing out at the same time because it's got so complex and it's so toxic and integral. It's a bit like the Epstein files. When you start looking, we've got one name or one little area that we're looking at, and there's a spider's web coming off it. And when that one thing starts to collapse, you know, I saw a quote the other day, and I think somebody was asking some woman in the White House why they haven't arrested anybody. And the answer was because if they start arresting people, the entire world will collapse. The system will collapse. Well, at some point, whether they like it or not, the system is going to collapse because potentially Trump and Israel have put themselves into a position where there's no winner for them. They're in a lose-lose situation. And for the short term, it's great for those psychopaths making the money who run the banks. I mean, even the BIS, the Bank of International Settlement, who controls all the central banks, they're now issuing warnings that none of the banks are going into the new Basel III, that the banks aren't ready for it. And they're worried that all the banks are going to take a step backwards. And if the banks take a step backwards, that's a kickback. It's a slowdown of the blockchain control mechanism going across everything. So, as I'm sure Meten will speak about tomorrow when we record tomorrow, there are certain plans in place that they need to get in place. They need to get certain things over the line to get to the next stage, If they can't get the banks into an alignment where they can blockchain them all at the same time, they can't blockchain. This is part of why the Iran war is going on, as I said, because it was leaking out the back door. You've got China and Iran breaking all the sanctions, trading oil for goods, a barter system. How dare a country barter with another country without using petrodollars? And it's just this complex mix, this whirlwind of craziness going on at the moment. And it's only going to build up. It's only going to get worse. Believe it or not.
And these leaders, they can always hide behind the people and the flags, and it could always be a part of the plot for them to, when they're on their way out, the back door, putting all the blame on this country or that country, and allowing that country to go into turmoil. That's always a possibility that the countries are itself being used as a kind of puppet, as a puppet head, as just to put to cover themselves and to look at in a way such that they can be played for any effect that they want to present as the new story of what's really occurring. And it's interesting what Gary said about this kind of perspective of different, how do you say this, like Gary was noting that the effects of all these different countries doing what they're doing right now is going to present in such a way that there's going to be consequences. But we may not even see the result of those consequences because there'll be newer plots and plans and tricks to cover that up. And that's what we're seeing continuously. And that's what's preventing us from seeing. They're putting blinders, like what you were saying earlier, Gary, they're putting blinders on us like they are on themselves. So we're always going to get confused about the real value of silver and gold, and always confused about why, it's doing so well and then all of a sudden it's not, because the manipulation of these markets is going to continue. And when they can't control it any longer, there's going to be the consequences to that, but they're going to have a movie ready to press play on, and we're going to have to see through that movie at that moment as it plays, and we're going to have to discern that that movie that's playing, we can't go to the theater and pay for that. We have to, because we're supporting it if we pay it energy, so we have to start moving in a direction where everything we look at is through interpretive eyes. Okay, so this is the news headline. So what is this news headline really saying, right? What is it really saying about what's occurring? And we don't have to be right, we don't have to be wrong. Just that act of beginning to interpret will get us so that we're no longer getting hyped up and psychologically controlled and manipulated by these extreme headlines that are just controlling our nervous system, and amping us up into matching those emotional Fibonacci cycles of consciousness. So it's really important that we, and I'll just reiterate this one more time before Gary has any last words, and then we'll see you guys tomorrow. It's so important at this time to just come back home into your vision, your Aries vortex vision, how it's doing, where do you have to factor in the reality checks that have been happening since February 20th, what's realistic, what's not, and then move forward as we enter the new year, the new spring equinox, the new spring ingress chart that we're going to look at tomorrow, and see what's coming.
Yeah, great roundup. We have to remember and remind ourselves that the headlines are really not the headlines. It's the narrative being played out to create that confusion and that illusion, So one analogy, okay? Now, there's a California governor called Gavin Newsom. Pretend will know who that is.
Gavin Gruesome is what we call him down here.
So Mr. Gruesome recently said something that kind of attacked AIPAC, who's one of the biggest controllers of American politics. Without doubt, before that statement went out, he contacted AIPAC, told them what he was going to do, and asked them if it was all right to do so. So the headline that you got was only after he'd got permission to say the thing in the first place to allow the headline to come out. And that's exactly where we are at the moment. Every headline is a contrived one of controlled demolition or controlled manipulation of a story or of a narrative that they're trying to keep up. And there's a lot of balls in the air at the moment. And as soon as one of those balls gets dropped, they're all going to start getting dropped.
Well said, man. Well said, Gary. Any other? Is that it? Should we end it there?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've got nothing else, and I'm really looking forward to watching these charts and see what the charts come up with, and if we can kind of put in some of what we're seeing at the moment as a continuation of what we might see coming in the future, because I don't think we're going to see necessarily a big bang of something happening, but I think we're going to start seeing gradual, or there'll be something becomes obvious that slows things down. But again, I want to see the charts before we make any further comments on that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys again tomorrow as me and Gary do the part two.
Yeah. And but remember, the part two tomorrow might not come out the day after. It could be 2 or 3 days later for us at least. So
we like talking about it like it's our kind of break days. All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.
bye bye, everyone. Thank you. Blessings, everyone. Bye.